You've heard of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Easy to say, hard to do. Stay tuned for Bible Study 159, where we ask, what's so golden about the golden rule? Hey everyone, this is Pastor Mark Pierce with Church Requel, and it's just great to be with you here on this first day after Labor Day. It's a bit overcast and actually a bit rainy from time to time, so I'm sitting out on my front porch where I have a little bit of overhead to protect me from the rain. But doing a Bible study this morning, we're up to Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. And if you'd like to join me, why don't you turn into your Bible while I read from mine. Matthew 7:12 reads this way, "So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets." You know, this is really the beginning and the end of the Sermon on the Mount. We have been in this so long that sometimes it's easy for us to forget the perspective of the entire Sermon on the Mount. But we really began with this same theme back in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, when Jesus said, "Don't think that I've come to abolish the law and the prophets, but to fulfill them." And then he goes on to give us the next two chapters, Matthew 5, Matthew 6, the beginning of Matthew 7, where he's explaining what he really means by how to fulfill the Old Testament teachings. Now we find the bookend to this, the other end of the Sermon on the Mount. And he's saying, hey, this is a reminder and a summary of what we're talking about here. Hey, if you don't remember all the details in the Old Testament, and even if you don't remember all the details in this particular sermon, remember this. Whatever it is that you wish someone else would do for you or to you, you do that to someone else. And in doing that, if you live out that principle, you will have lived out all of both the Old Testament teachings and also what I'm teaching you here in the Sermon on the Mount. Now, Jesus was certainly not the first to give this general principle. We find it in other religions, especially in the Jewish teachings of the century right before Jesus. Just a generation before Jesus, there is the teacher Hillel, who put it this way, "What is hateful to yourself, do to no other." In fact, Hillel goes on to say, "This is the whole law, and the rest is commentary." The difference between what Hillel and other teachers had said and what maybe Jesus puts into this Sermon on the Mount and Jesus' perspective on this is that Jesus put this principle into positive terms. It's not just that you don't do to someone else what you would find, hateful to you, but it's the positive. You don't, you go and do those things to others that you wish someone else would do to you. It's much more inclusive than the negative is by itself. It's possible that you could go through all of life not doing anything to anyone else that would be hateful to you, and yet at the same time not going out of your way to do anything that you would love someone else to do for you. Jesus is saying that this is the Christian life of fulfilling the law and the prophets, that it's a matter of both the doing as well as the not doing. There's another thing that comes to my mind as I was studying this verse this morning, and that is the plural form of this verse. When you take a look at this in the Greek language, you do especially remember that this is said to a large group of people, or at least it's said to more than one. This entire passage, in fact, just about the entire Sermon on the Mount, is given to the plural you, as in you all. Now, this could be simply explained, and I'm sure many scholars would explain this as simply being the fact that Jesus is preaching to more than one person. And so when he's addressing the you, of course, he's going to use the plural form. And so, it would be a normal thing to do. But I think that when we are taking a look at this, we read it as perhaps maybe someone in the audience would have heard it, and that is not you all, but you each. In other words, as if I'm sitting in the crowd, I'm going to understand that it's my responsibility to do unto others as I would have them do unto me, right? But there is a sense, I think, that we should at least contemplate of the collective you, the plural you, the group you, that we not only do this individually, but that we should also be doing unto others corporately. You know, sometimes I think it's easy to hide behind the corporate veil, whether it be in a business sense or a government sense, and frankly, sadly, even in a church sense. Well, you know, I wouldn't want to do this to someone else. I wouldn't have them do it this way to me, or I wish that, you know, the church would treat me in a certain way, or the business would treat me in a certain way. But, you know, I'm not in charge of it, and so I don't take responsibility for it. But I think that this teaching of Jesus, as is true of, you know, the prayer that he talked about before, is something that is done both in individual sense and in group sense. This should be a community teaching, that we should be doing unto others as a group what we wish that they would be doing to us. And honestly, that makes this a lot harder. It takes a lot of commitment, and it takes some work to make this happen. But ultimately, it's really what the church should be about. Remember earlier in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talked about the prayer, what we now refer to as the Lord's Prayer. And we talked about the concept of God's will, right? Jesus prayed in Gethsemane, not my will, but thy will be done. In the Lord's Prayer, it's thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Well, this really brings us into the bookends, not only of this Sermon on the Mount, but the bookends of history, both of history and the future. You see, this is what really God did in the Garden of Gethsemane, if you stop and think about it. He created this beautiful world for mankind, and he said that it was good. And what was really good about it was that he did something that would be wonderful for man, not just for himself. It was something that he truly was exemplifying, the doing unto others, what you would wish them to do unto you. It's the creation of this whole paradise for man that he did, right? And we know that ultimately that is a direction that we're aiming to, right? As our future, that ultimately there is going to be a new heaven and a new earth. And what is so special about the new earth is that this is going to be the place where God's will be done. All of creation is being redeemed back to this ultimate good of doing good to others. So, how do we actually go about doing that in our micro world of the world that you live in and the world that I live in? Jesus says, hey, it's real simple. Not easy, but real simple. It comes right down to doing unto others as we would have them do unto us. Here's a challenge that I would share with you on this Tuesday morning. You know, put some practicality to this teaching. Even now, as you think about it, who is there in your life that you can think of who maybe just needs what you need, who needs a hug, who needs a word of affirmation, who maybe could use a few bucks, who maybe could use some help, who maybe could use some encouragement? Think about at least one, maybe several other people in your life that you could do some good to today. Thanks for joining me today, and when we come back for our next Bible study, number 160, we'll be talking about the narrow gate. Have a great day, everyone.